thinkers, and welcome to the podcast. I'm Celine, a media graduate with an interest in cults.
Hi, I'm Stephen. I'm Celine's dad. I was raised in a high control group or cult. These days, I'm a leadership and management trainer and coach, also trained as an organisation psychologist, which is why I'm so interested in this topic. Welcome to the podcast, everybody.
Here we go. So, should we just...
Your topic this week.
Yeah.
I couldn't think of one, and literally we are cutting it fine. So normally we give ourselves a few days to think about it, record it, and then edit it. But it's now Friday morning.
There was a time when it was weeks before,
Yeah.
batch recorded.
It's now Friday morning. I release it tomorrow. And we just thought of a topic this morning, and it's your idea.
Yeah,
So tell us.
I thought about it a while ago, and then I forgot to text you about it. Because normally this is how we remind ourselves what we want to talk about. But I was watching a documentary called How to Live to 100 on Netflix. It was actually quite interesting. I think it was in 3 or 4 parts. So it is this guy. He's very interested in health and vitality, effectively. And he's quite he's won some sort of like cycling competitions or Guinness World Records and things like that. So he's like cycling around the world and things like that. And he's just interested in living long but quality life, not just the way you probably imagine an old person in a bed. He's really interested in these really fit, amazingly healthy people, and so that's kind of the osmosis of this documentary, where then osmosis is the wrong word. There's something else entirely.
Yeah.
That's the
I was thinking that. I was trying to work out how the word osmosis fit into that sentence.
It doesn't. Surprise. It's the sort of like the nugget, the beginning of this
kernel.
That's the one. It's the kernel of this documentary. So what he finds out about is blue zones. So blue zones are places where people live for much longer, much better quality of life, so less disease, and healthy, longer lived people than the rest of the world generally. So basically places where there are the most 100-year-olds. So this was where he would be going to visit and seeing what are they doing to have such high percentage of well-lived people. And he's basically trying to find, I guess, the recipe for how we should all be living to live longer and healthier. And it was very interesting. But one thing that he picked up on, and that was prevalent within all of the groups to varying degrees, was faith or a religion in some sort. And he seems to think that that's contributing to these long-lived people. Like, why are they living so healthy and long? And he thinks that faith is a contributing factor. Bear in mind, there's lots and lots within the circle of why he thinks these people live for a long time, like their diets.
Just one of the factors, you're saying. Yeah.
One of many. So, watch the documentary if you want to see all of it. But obviously for our interest, I thought to myself, I guess I'll point out my immediate bias was it puts my back up slightly, given what we do and what we talk about quite a lot. I don't want to feel as though to live a very good quality, long-lived life, I need to have a faith, because I don't think that's true. But I do accept that there are benefits to having a faith, and I wondered if we'd be able to talk about what those benefits are and how you could strip those out of a religion. So can you take what's good about religion out of religion? Do you have to have a god to do, or a spirituality, I suppose, to be able to take the goodness out of that and then live it? So there you go. I've talked for ages.
Yeah.
You'll go.
Okay. Yeah. So I suppose the first thing I would, obviously I haven't seen the show, which is probably a good thing, really, because that gives me, I can interrogate you about it. I suppose the first thing I would ask is, I think it's important to remember, and this is true for any documentary or popular presentation of something is that there's a difference between a documentary about something or some reporting about something and proper research.
Yeah.
So often these documentaries might quote research, they might use research to make their point, but of course they're going to cherry pick that research to help with the narrative that they're stringing through the show. And obviously, as somebody that makes films or has made films in the past, Celine, you know about that. So there needs to be a
Yeah.
narrative arc, even in a documentary. There's
And
a narrative
ultimately,
arc.
he was just doing a pattern seeking exercise, and then he's
Yeah,
feeding that back
yeah.
in this part of the doc.
So it's not proof, but it is interesting, and it's not. Of course, it's not the first time that that's been presented. It's interesting. When I was doing some research into spiritual abuse, I was looking at. So I've been applying for PhDs last year, and one of the PhDs was a funded piece of research to do with spiritual abuse, and a lot of the papers that cover spiritual abuse seem to start with the same sort of sentence, which is, it has been shown that spiritual belief can be beneficial to mental health and blah, blah, blah. And I'm always kind of skeptical about that line. There's always a quote to some paper, but often these papers are kind of quite old. And yeah, I'd like to, first of all, so I suppose what I'm saying is there's a few gates that I would need to go through in order to accept the premise of some of the things that you said already.
Yeah.
So there's a skeptical lens that I would look through all of that before we get on to the question of, is there anything good in religion that we can take from it? And say, well, you could get the benefits without the belief system. We should say, obviously, some of our listeners will have beliefs in God and be religious, and that's absolutely, of course, you have an absolute right to that, and we're not here to belittle you or, to criticize you for that. I'm an agnostic atheist, I suppose I describe myself as. I'm not an aggressive atheist, but I don't believe in God. And I don't actually think it's possible to be able to demonstrate it in a scientifically provable way. Doesn't mean that we know everything, but I don't feel that the truth is held in religious conviction. That's my assessment of that. I think you're similar. We're just putting our cards on the table here so people understand, I
Of
guess.
course. I've never felt any desire or comfort from the idea of a god or I guess just a spirituality kind of thing. It's never done anything for me, and it's not something I've a lot of people that have been guests have described themselves or family members as seekers. I've never felt that seeking need.
Yeah. So that's where we are, but it doesn't mean that we're right. It could be that we're wrong about that there is a God, and that is possible. Anything is possible. However, so that out the way, one of the things that I think we have to ask a question about is correlation versus causation. And a lot of these conclusions that people come to around these sorts of clusters are that, you look at correlations, you look at what are the factors that seem to be common in these communities, and then there is an assumption made that there must be some causal link to living a long time. And I think we just got to be careful of that, because it doesn't necessarily mean it is. So I did a little bit of, just before we came on the podcast, I did a little bit of looking through Google Scholar, and there's quite a few bits of research around this, and what they seem to be saying is that you've got to be careful that it actually is more likely to be the personality traits, the individual differences, which we've spoken about many times on this podcast, just for people who haven't listened to those, the core 5 personality traits that psychologists have identified are, easy way to remember it is ocean, openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And these 5 different traits are, you can think about them on 5 different scales, and then we measure those, and that to some degree describes our personality traits. And the one that comes out quite a lot in these studies is agreeableness, but there's also a correlation between agreeableness and social, being very social or sociable, and of course the religious aspect keys into that. So it could be that actually one that is the opposite way around. So it's not the religion that is making you live longer, it's you being agreeable, as in your nature you are an
Mhm.
agreeable person, very social person, and that leads you to have people around you that care about you and makes you happier, and so on and so on, and that leads to a longer life. It also means you are more likely to be religious
Mm.
because you are agreeable and you like people and you like to associate with people, and you get a lot of that at the church. But
Yeah.
actually the church has got nothing to do with the longevity, it's the agreeableness, and
Mm.
the agreeableness is causing both the long life and the religious affiliation.
Mhm.
So I'm not saying that's proven, but you just have to be really careful when you make assumptions about clusters and characteristics that seem to be common in them all. You're not sure correlations and causation, plus you're not sure which direction they're going in. So that's just an
Mm.
off the top of my head thought.
Mhm.
And then we'd need to prove the link. The other factor that I thought about when you were talking about this, you then have to prove the link between psychological happiness and long life,
Mhm.
and that is often assumed that people who are happier live longer lives.
Mhm.
Um, but again, you'd need to be able to demonstrate that through research, and that's very, very difficult
Yeah,
because
well, you're gonna have to make
defining
people
happiness
miserable.
is really hard.
Yeah, and
Well,
do
it's
you
hard to define happiness.
right, okay.
How do you define happiness?
It's
How can
different for
I?
everyone.
Yeah, so long life is easy to measure, or the
Yeah,
length of life is easy to measure. That's a real
like disease
tangible,
indicators and
measurable
things,
quality.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, but happiness is very difficult to measure because it isn't tangible like that.
No, and
So
it's
that's where you get
individual
into trouble.
difference again, isn't it? So, you know,
Mm.
yeah.
Well, it's your inner feeling to start with. So there's a whole few of layers. There's a whole bunch of layers between the individual and being able to report on that, if you see
Mhm.
what I mean. So there's the way you feel in the first place. There's that inner experience that nobody really understands anybody else's inner experience.
Mhm.
There's then your own assessment of that experience. There's when you're reporting on that, how you're feeling at the time,
Mhm.
because of course it's a snapshot.
Mm.
There's then the way you've described it, either through prose, your own words, and your ability to accurately report on your inner state. Or if you're doing it through a questionnaire, it's the ability of somebody who's written that questionnaire to be able to reflect on those multiple choice questions the way you really feel, and for you to be able to choose the one that most closely relates to the this
Which
inner experience.
which it turns out is actually really hard.
Yeah,
Which you'd think
it
it
is really
should be
hard.
really easy, but just to know how you feel, but it's really not.
No, it's not. Now, that's not to say that there's no value in any of that stuff, but it's one of the things that when I was doing the masters, I got quite frustrated about, because a lot of the work in organizational psychology is done through questionnaires and
Yeah,
surveys.
self-reporting. But
Yeah,
how else do you
and
get
then a
the
lot of maths is done on it, but it
mm,
so it feels robust. It feels like, oh, you've applied this
mm,
statistical rule and you've done that, and all that work is done. But the bit up front, the bit
uh,
where you're getting the data, I think is the weak point.
mm. So until we can scan the brain and see if it's a happy brain or not, we're going to struggle.
That's a great point, isn't it? Can we? Are we ever going to get to a point where we can see a happy shaped brain, or
Yeah.
the cross sections of those
Mhm.
scanned brains? Yeah, that's that. To a degree, we should be able to, because there are
Mhm.
centers of pleasure and so on. But then,
Yeah.
is pleasure the same as happiness? Not
Yeah.
necessarily.
Contentedness is very difficult as well.
Yeah.
Because what is
Mm.
content? What is content?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So
So it is difficult.
basically, um, it's just pointless. This conversation I've got with you.
let's
Um,
let's stop the podcast now. No,
yeah. Okay.
no. So all
So
you've got, I think, all you have to go on then is at the end of the day people's explanations and stories, and you're back to something that is not
yeah.
very scientific,
Yeah.
which is really
Yeah.
interesting.
So that's basically it with this
Yeah.
with this yeah with this documentary. It's different kinds of religion. So it goes to somewhere in Japan where it's more kind of so it's that sort of Buddhism tradition, or more spirituality, not necessarily going to a particular place of worship at a particular time. It's different from Western religion, isn't it?
Hmm.
And the way that we organize ourselves
Yeah.
into church groups and so on. So that's one kind of different way that I suppose a lot of our listeners, it's different to what we talk about generally. Then you've got the more traditional thing with the is it Anabaptists?
Yeah.
Is that the correct
Anabaptist.
way of
Yeah.
saying it? Yeah. I always
Hmm.
feel like I'm saying it wrong.
So that was a group that was in the
Mhm.
Netflix show, was it?
Yeah. So they also live for a really long time. Um, and especially comparatively, because they're in this group's in the States. So compared to the
Mm.
States as well,
Mm.
they're actually living a lot longer. Um, you've also, which is a lot more of a organized religious group, with church groups, and they have lots of community aspect to it. Then you've got some of these are sort of older groups, so it's like there's Greek places, and there's a place around like one of the sort of Italian small
Is it Sardinia?
yeah, something like one of those small little island
Mm.
groups, and they all both live a long time as well. They have aspects of religion, but I suppose not in the same degree to the Anabaptists, where it's as um, organised. It's they
Mm.
probably amble up the hill to church every Sunday, um,
Mm.
and the documentary guy, the presenter, he does rightfully say, she goes to church. I mean, one of the ladies makes sure she goes to church every day, but she's going up this massive hill every day. And he's like, that's probably doing amazing things for her health, because she goes up this
Yeah.
massive hill every day to go
Mm.
see her God, in fact, go to the place of worship, and then she comes all the way back down again and she makes some gnocchi or whatever. So
Mm.
he does point out that it's not inherently maybe that relationship with God, but what it drives her to do is go up this massive hill that she
Yeah.
might not otherwise do. So it's kind of interesting because it's complicated in that way. So I suppose, the reason he thinks it's beneficial is it having something to believe in, I suppose, is the way he describes it. But the word he uses is faith. So that's why I was like, my little spidey senses were
But it's
going.
not all right. So let's separate these out. So
Yeah.
as you're talking there, I'm thinking about different types of benefit. So
Hmm.
I think you've got. So first of all, you may have. So let's for a minute suspend our um, skepticism
Yeah. Yeah.
that there isn't a link. Let's say there is a link
Yeah. Hmm.
between some sort of religious affiliation and living longer lives. Let's
Hmm.
let's let's say that I'm not saying there is, but I'm just gonna
Yeah. To have this conversation,
assume
we've got
for a
we've got to
moment. Yeah,
start from here.
got to. Yeah, let's do that. All right. So then you might say there might be different categories of benefit. So one benefit might be direct physical benefits. So most religions, or many religions, have certain dietary requirements or restrictions, and also a restriction on things like alcohol and drugs, which are generally considered to be quite bad for us. So a clean living, I suppose you could describe it
Hmm.
as, might might actually have some health benefits.
Yeah, and the
So
Baptists encourage a
yeah,
vegetarian lifestyle. So
yeah. So and we know pretty well. I think I'm no dietitian, but from what I've read, is that
Mhm,
um, lower calorie eating less, essentially being less than, I suppose, weighing less than
mhm.
um, many of us in the Western world weigh, has a benefit. So
Yeah.
yeah, and an austere lifestyle generally includes not eating too much. So
Mhm.
there's rules against gluttony in the Bible. Different religions have different approaches to
Yeah.
alcohol, but often it's either moderation or not at all. Um, Certainly, drugs are generally looked down upon in religious groups. Not always, of course. Some religions use drugs as a,
Mhm.
but even then, they're quite disciplined in their use. They're not
Mm.
recreational so much as
Part
they're
of the.
controlled in
Mm.
terms of their communities. So it could be that there's a real, so that's category one, I would say, a direct physical benefit in that the rules of the religion mean that you are doing things that make you live longer, and that's because of the religion itself. So that would be category one, I would
Mm.
say.
Mhm.
Um, Category two could be indirect benefits, like the woman walking up that hill every day to go to
Mhm.
church. It's not that there's a rule in the Bible that says you must walk up a
Up
one
a
in
hill.
five hill
Mhm.
every day, but
Mhm.
in the course of her religious devotion, she's doing things incidentally that mean that she's leading a healthier life. So that, I think, is another category.
Mhm.
And then the third category is the psychological one. So it fulfills some psychological need, which makes you happier and more contented,
Mm.
and that then leads to a longer life. So
Yeah.
again, um, we'll have to agree that there is that link between
Yeah.
happiness and longevity.
We'll get onto that one and go into it. We'll pull it
Yeah.
around a little bit. But yeah,
What do you
I
think
think
about those categories? Do they make sense?
no, I think those are good because I think yeah. So our first one, the direct link, I think yeah makes sense. So I think we do know that there's lots of studies that say basically a plant-based bean-heavy diet is much better for you. Yay
Yeah.
for beans than a red meat-based sort of
Yeah.
dependent protein diet.
Mm.
Um, So come on, everyone, on the bean train. You don't need
Eat the
religion for
beans.
beans. But yeah, a lot of these religious groups
Mm.
encourage that, especially like I said, the Baptists encourage um, a plant-based diet.
And Anabaptist, yeah.
Yes, the Anabaptists. So that is like you said, that direct link.
Mm.
Um, and then stuff like the community stuff, that's incidental. You'd say that's that part two as well. So walking up the hill is incidental to get to church. Would you say community is incidental? Would you say that slots more into part one?
Well, I think it depends. No, I would say that's so you're talking more about a psychological.
Mhm.
Well,
See, it's hard.
yeah, a community might. So first of all, it might protect you. So physically
Mm,
protect you. So in
mhm,
that sense, going to a community, being part of a community means that you're looking out for each other,
mm.
which means that if um, I don't know if Gennaro hasn't been to church this morning, then people think, "Where's Gennaro?"
Mhm.
And so somebody goes and has knocks on his door and checks on him. Now that just simple thing, we know from our societies that when communities don't do any of that stuff, then we hear tragedies of people dying in their houses
Yeah,
and
yeah.
nobody knowing about it. Um, and yeah, just looking after each other has got to have a physical benefit. I would say that's an indirect physical benefit. Um, and going back long enough, I suspect that religions are born out of the need to, you know, have tribes and groups to protect ourselves from another tribe or from wild animals or, looking after each other against the elements. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I think for me, that would be, it doesn't matter which category, but that would be, I think, an indirect
Yeah.
benefit of
Mhm.
of it. But there's another side of being in a community, and that's the psychological bit,
Mhm. Yeah.
which I think we should get to perhaps
Yeah. So I
after.
suppose in terms of this, because I was thinking about the psychological, so I suppose there's the
Mm.
independent psychological. So this idea of it bringing, a desire to believe. Let's assume that everyone benefits from a belief here. So there's that, but there's also, I guess, yeah, the wider um, benefit of having a group and a community.
Yeah. So when you say that the hypothesis is that
Mm.
people benefit from having a faith, that's
Hmm.
not good enough. That's
Yeah.
that's only the beginning. So you'd have to say,
Hmm.
right, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? What is that
Hmm.
mechanism?
Hmm.
Because just believing in something isn't in itself going to make you
You
live
believe
longer.
in, yeah.
I could really believe that, I don't know, Doctor Who is real. I could really believe that, and that's not going to make me live longer. So just having a belief doesn't.
Yeah.
It's what that belief potentially does,
Mm.
either to your physical activity or
Yeah.
your mental state. So
Yeah.
just belief in itself is not. I can't. I
Mm.
cannot. I cannot believe. I cannot accept that just having a belief is the thing. It must be that it's creating some other
Mm.
benefit. That is the
Driving you
thing.
to do
It could be
things.
happiness. It could
Yeah.
be lower anxiety
Yeah.
levels. So it could be some of those things, but just the belief bit isn't good, isn't enough.
Yeah.
It has to be causing something else.
Yeah. So I suppose if you believe that what I suppose I can understand. For me, it's something I've never experienced. I can understand that if you're having bad times, you're going through difficult times. But if you believe in a God, I suppose it gives you a belief that things will be okay again. Hopefully, I guess, I don't know. But the thing is,
Yeah, it's a
you know,
double-edged sword.
yeah,
Taking
yeah,
using a Bible metaphor. So
mm,
my problem with the belief
as a
as the
benefit.
catalyst,
Hmm.
as the benefit, is that it depends what you believe, doesn't it?
Yeah,
So
because I can get my head around the first two. Because of course, it's getting this woman up and about walking, or it's
yeah,
getting
that's
people
right.
into communities. Provides we know that social interaction is good for people. These are all quite obvious logical steps, but I suppose just belief itself is the one that's tricky.
Yeah.
It's tricky.
Yeah, and I think it really does depend on what that
Mhm.
belief is. So if you believe that God is loving
Mhm.
and that He is, you know that when you die, you're going to go to heaven
Mhm.
and you're going to see your dead husband or wife or loved ones, and you're absolutely convinced about that. But you're not worried about hell. You're not worried
Mhm.
about God not loving you or of
Mm.
Him rejecting you, then I think that belief could have a positive effect on your
Yeah.
happiness,
Mhm.
and it would lower your anxiety because you have no doubt that
Mhm.
because God is loving, He's going to be there for you, and He's going to help you in this life, but He's also going to help you in the next life. So that's all positive stuff. But if
Mm.
you believe that God is the sort of God that you get in the Old Testament, let's say um, this God
Angry,
that
wrathful,
is
drown you if you mean
wrathful,
to.
yeah, and jealous, and all these lovely qualities, then I think that now this is where I will speak for myself. I was incredibly anxious
Mm.
because I had those beliefs, the
Yeah.
belief that God was going to destroy everybody at Armageddon, but also that that He could read my mind and know if I
Mm.
was thinking bad thoughts or if I was saying something that wasn't being a good witness. All of those things, and it could affect other people. So my behavior could affect other people's beliefs as well, and
Mhm.
that was so I found a belief in God incredibly um, anxiety inducing.
Mm.
So that's why I say belief in itself is not enough. It has to be a belief that is is a
Positive.
positive belief, and that
Mm.
even if we again, I'm just giving you the
Mhm.
the hypothesis that happiness equals long life, which I don't
Mm.
think it's quite as easy as that, as simple
Mhm.
as that. But if we do say that, then happiness, contentment, low anxiety, if it's related to belief at all, it's got to be beliefs that are ones that generate those sorts of feelings.
Mm.
And unfortunately, a lot of religions
Bring in the
don't.
fire and brimstone.
Yeah, and certainly when we get to cults, because we haven't mentioned the C word
Yeah.
today, other than the beginning.
Mhm.
When you get to cults, I think this is one of the things that makes cults so damaging, is that they use the negative, they wield that negative consequences
Mhm.
quite heavily,
Yeah.
and it's that bit I think that makes people unhappy
Mhm.
because they are anxious about pleasing the guru, the gods, the
Mhm.
leader, whatever, and that has a very damaging psychological impact on
Yeah.
us. And then any benefits that might be there in a close community with protection and people around you and so on and so on, they're lost because you
Mhm.
are in this anxious state.
Yeah. I suppose as we have laid our cards on the table, I think it's quite clear that we don't necessarily think a belief for the belief's sake is, you know, gonna do massive things for you or make you live to 100. But obviously, like we said, we can understand how you would get benefits from incidental or direct things,
Mm,
because so that's quite easy to understand. Um, so if we'll pick up again on the emotional side, I suppose, afterwards, but from the actual positive benefits. So let's say you're in a group that just does nice things, um, none of the fire and brimstone, but you don't
mm,
want to be religious, because I think there's a lot of people that listen to this. I think ourselves included, that we don't we don't want to find the good one, to a good religion to be
mm.
happy or to have a long life or a good life. um it, you know can we scrape these things out of it and use them? Do we already do that? Um
Mm.
because people go, well, without religion, we'll people, they like to talk about these benefits and say we'll lose them. Will we lose them? Can we take them?
Yeah. So, uh, as I think listeners might know, I'm a paid up member of the Humanist UK
Hmm.
Society. I have done some work for them in schools where I've actually stopped doing it now because I've had too much to
Hit
do,
at the brim, haven't
uh,
you?
and I'm trying to reduce my anxiety levels by reducing everything that I'm having to do. But anyway, but I did enjoy doing that, where you go to schools and you talk about humanism, what it is, and the beliefs, I suppose, of many humanists. Can't speak for all humanists because obviously that's the beauty of it, is that there isn't a central
Mhm.
kind of, there's no humanist pope. Um, but I think, yes, as a humanist, I would absolutely say that you don't need a belief in God to be happy. Some of the things that religion might give you, absolutely we can do.
Mhm.
Maybe we don't do them well enough. Maybe we need to improve as a society to do these things better. So, yeah, there's actually a philosopher called Alain de Botton, who is, I mean, it describes him here as an author, but he's he's kind of a philosopher, and he's again is a secularist, I suppose. But he's done a really interesting TED talk that I think you can probably still find online, where he talks about the need for secularists to, and humanists really, to adopt some of the things that churches get right,
Mm.
like getting together, having a sing song,
Mhm.
um, and that's one of the things. People like Richard Dawkins, who, of course, famous atheist. He loves church music and he finds it
Mhm.
absolutely beautiful, and he seeks out opportunities to listen to that. So, choirs, getting together,
Mhm.
having charity events, those sorts of things. I mean, obviously, for a certain age, there's differences in age, and younger people are not necessarily going to want to get involved in choir singing, although they might, of course. We
Yeah.
can't
They used
discriminate.
to, didn't they?
They used to. That's right. And there's something about that, and maybe that's where we need to work a bit harder,
Mhm.
to find ways to do some of those social things that church made us do.
Mhm.
or that gave us a reason to do, and we don't do so much. We do get some of those things through, like going to a sporting event, for instance. So
Mhm.
football supporters will sing, and there'll be a camaraderie around that.
Mhm.
Um, Going to a rock concert, that's a very communal thing.
Mhm.
Even going to a pub when there's a piano in the pub or something, and suddenly everybody's singing.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, there might be a bit of alcohol involved in that, of course, but there's a definitely a communal element to that, and that's something that church does possibly provide for you. But you
Mhm.
don't have to have the belief
Yeah.
system around that to do some of those things. So yeah, I think we could do more of that. Thank you for listening to Cult Hackers, an indie podcast. That means we're not part of a big media organisation with huge advertising budgets and massive reach. So just by listening to this, you're supporting the little guy. The hardest thing for us is not content. We love recording episodes and talking to amazing and interesting people. No, by far the hardest thing is getting in front of the potential millions of listeners out there with millions of podcasts scrambling for attention. And here's where you can help. Simply by telling people about the podcast. Just telling somebody about it can really help. You can share an episode on social media or private messaging using your app, or on some apps you can leave a rating, and better still, say a few words. So please help us get Cult Hackers in front of more people. And now back to the podcast.
I suppose when you've been part of a group, so you can talk to this. But I suppose the thing for me is not really having been part of the group. We left when I was 4, so um,
Yeah.
you know, so I find it difficult, I suppose, to put myself into a group. So, for instance,
Mm.
like I moved to somewhere that I'm not from. It's not exactly like miles away or anything, but
Mm.
it's difficult to just be like, I'm going to be part of a new community now. How do I
Yeah.
begin to just become part of a community? So obviously, if
Mm.
you're religious and you have a particular church group, you can just go to the
Yeah.
church of your group in that area. So if you
Yeah.
were a Jehovah's Witness and you moved from Peterborough to wherever, you would just immediately be dropped into a new community and you'd be folded in.
Yeah.
um, and not to say that you always want that, but that is, for me, I'm just like, how do I even begin to be like, okay, I'm going to put roots down here and become
Mm.
part of a community? I mean, I guess this comes back to when we were talking about friendship in the Patreon takeover
Mm.
episode. It's like, how do you? It's not built in. How do you begin? Because or even when there is things, it feels awkward or weird. It feels weird. It's not something I'm used to.
Yeah.
So because like there's a little orchard around here and there's a gardening group that meets every two
Mm.
weeks. And I'm like, that sounds nice, and I've just never grown the courage to go and engage with it because I'm like, oh, it might be a bit
But I
awkward.
think I think you've hit upon the answer, though. I think it is things like that.
Mhm.
That it's community groups. It's, I mean, charities are a really
Yeah,
good one, and it's a really important one. I think
they highlight that
it's
as
what,
being a benefit in the doc as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
helping other people is one of the most pleasurable things you can do. It gives you
Mhm.
that kind of hit.
The happy
It gives you
hormones.
that yeah, it gives you that hit of serotonin, and it's great. You really feel like you've achieved something, even though it might be a small thing.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that, I mean, some people get involved in local politics,
Yeah.
and that's a way to find your tribe, if you like, your clan.
Mhm.
But yeah, just I think that but it is a very good point, and it is one of the reasons I think why religions and these sorts of groups have continued.
Yeah. Because I
But
do, yeah,
um,
because I do know somebody that they've said their mum started going to a religious sort
mm,
of organization, joined up again, and she's very into it. But also, he's like, but she was quite lonely, and she's got friends
yeah,
now, and they're a bit weird, but at least she's got someone to see and something to do.
yeah,
So it's interesting.
yeah. So I think there are some benefits to that. So yeah, local. local groups of various different kinds. I mean, these things take effort, though. So that I
Yeah.
suppose that's the thing. It's not always, you don't
It's not
always want to be
circumstantial where you
bothered.
just end up there. You do have to like
That's right. Yeah, you have to
engage. And I
put forth the
really
effort.
hate being new earthing. I hate it so much. I'd rather just no one mention it and I just slowly become part of this new
Yeah,
thing. Whereas it's a whole thing, isn't it?
I think the other thing that's worth mentioning. So we haven't had anybody on, but I want to get somebody on from Faith to Faithless.
Mm,
In the UK, particularly, they've started a helpline for people who
yeah.
leave their groups. So that's something that is really important. But
Hmm.
also, they have, and I think there's groups like this around the world. There's I spoke to Sherry D'Souza from Recovering from Religion. That's an international organisation, and they do these groups where you can just join online. It's all online. It's all kind of through Zoom or whatever, and you chat to people who've had similar experiences. So again, we're getting back to support of recovering from a
Hmm.
group, but it is a nice way to
Yeah.
just sort of hang out, and it's something
Hmm.
I've done. I think part of why I joined the Humanist Society was again for the same thing, just to find a little group and
Hmm.
sort of find some group to community to get affiliated in. But
Hmm.
and then if you don't need it anymore, that's also fine too, which is the nice thing about these groups. You don't have to keep going, whereas church
Hmm.
can start to become a bit of a bind. You
Yeah.
like get told off if you don't go.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that can be a downside. But yeah, so community, yes, and that has physical benefits. It also has some psychological benefits because we know that one thing we do know about human psychology is that we do need other people. We do need each other. And
Hmm.
so if we deny ourselves that entirely, then yeah, we suffer because of that.
Well then, I have to go to the gardening group. Oh.
You'll have to
That's
go to the gardening group. No, I think, but again, only if you want to. So that's the other
yeah.
thing. I think I don't know
I know,
what
yeah,
these.
trying to force yourselves into doing
Yeah,
like this
these
prescribed
societies
how to live well
exactly.
101. Yeah.
You don't want to be a wellness Nazi, dear. And this is what worries me a bit about some of these things. Like it's you must eat this sort of foods, and you must
Yeah.
do this, and you must do that. Um,
Let's just do our
and
best.
I think so. Yeah, I think that reducing anxiety is generally a good thing.
Hmm.
So let's not then become anxious about being well. And again, there's a lot of these wellness gurus that I think actually prey upon
Hmm.
people's desire to
Yeah.
be happy and well, and actually it makes them
Hmm.
anxious.
And well, I will add to this. So,
Mm.
we've had the discussion, so I feel like I can add this on without ruining the discussion now. So, the one thing that he did do is he goes back to the States and he starts to try and implement it in some of the towns, like implement
Okay.
some of the
Yeah.
things that he's learned. But he doesn't mention religion because I think trying
Mm.
to implement at a government level religion is rogue. So he doesn't mention that, and I
Mm.
don't think that that's part of it. They implement basically giving everybody buddies to go walking with. So they go on these little walks. Yeah, yeah. Like you have to agree to join this. You don't just
Mm.
like, there's not a strange man that comes to your door and says, Maureen is your walking buddy. Learn to like her. But no, people that want to be involved, they yeah, you get like randomly put with a few people and you go for walks to kind of emulate community that
Mm.
these people have. And to bring in more exercise to they change how the supermarkets are, so there's more fresh produce, more plant-based produce, and things like that. And they do a few things. They make the streets more walkable, so you're not needing a car everywhere. So they just do a few very
Mm.
standard things, um basically helping people get their BMIs down, um, all of that sort of thing. Yeah, exercising more, seeing people, community events and such. And yeah, the so they do some tests to see what your kind of biological health is before that. They do it after
Yeah.
that, and they're like
Hmm.
estimating that people are biologically more healthy. And they don't mention the religion bit, but
Yeah.
that's kind of all the stuff we've talked about that would incidentally be happening because
Mm.
of,
Mm.
so having friends, going on
What was the
walks.
effect? Did it have a benefit
Yeah, so they said
on
that
those metrics?
yeah, so I think it was something like they'd expect people to live on average like 2.5 more years than they'd originally estimated. If they
Mm.
continued living their lives as they were living, they'd live to X age. After they've done this for, I think, a year, they'd estimate they'd live for a couple more years if they
Right.
continued it. Um,
Interesting.
and there's no reason for that to cease. I think it's something called like the Blue Zone Project or something. Um,
Right.
I
Okay.
think they did it in the
Interesting.
80s and they continue to do bits in different towns as well. So it's kind of a bit, it's still a bit of an experiment, really, isn't it? It's a bit of
Mm. Mm.
a test because, the idea of being able to do that across an entire nation as big as the States is huge, right? There was a few women that were interviewed for the news at the time, and they've used the clip in the documentary. And they said, would you two have been friends? And they're like, no, not really, but we really get on.
Mm.
We really like
Mm.
going for our walks, and we keep going for our little walks. And they're really
Yeah.
glad for it. So it was quite good, really. It was interesting. And yeah, there was no mention of, yeah, and we all go to church now. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
No one was saying that.
Yeah.
Um, so that was interesting.
So, can I just throw in a bit of individual psychology
Yeah.
while we're talking about the psychology
Mhm.
of it? I thought when I was thinking about this, the my favourite model, the self determination theory, Deci
Mhm.
and Ryan, I think relates to this. We've talked about this on numerous episodes, but and we talked about it as the ABC, I think,
Yeah.
but
It's always
technically
relevant.
it is. But technically, it's autonomy. So that's the a sense of autonomy. Um, Relatedness is the second one, but we called it belongingness to give it a B, and then feelings of
Mhm.
competence is the C. So if we think about those three: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. If you think about what going to a church gives you,
Mhm.
and it also can differentiate between, let's call it a bad church or a good church,
Mhm.
or a bad religion and a good religion,
Mhm.
from a psychological perspective. Nothing to do with the beliefs.
Mhm.
So I'm not talking about truth claims here, but we're saying that a religion that gives you a sense of autonomy, a sense of relatedness, and a sense of competence is likely to mean that your psychological needs are met.
Mhm.
Now, there's lots of religions that don't do that, but there are some that do. And I would suggest that quite an interesting study might be, if you look at these different religious groups, I wonder if the ones that produce more of those three elements are the ones that actually make people happier. So lots of religions. So autonomy. This is the the feeling that you have agency.
Mhm.
You can make decisions for yourself. You don't need other people to make decisions for you. Um, this doesn't mean you're on your own, so it's not isolating yourself, but it's your own agency, your ability to make decisions for yourself. And a lot of religions stifle that, I think, which is why people
Mhm.
don't like them and they're unhappy. Cults stifle that. Certainly when you're in them, when you're being attracted to them, you're attracted by, oh, I can make a decision to change the rest of
Yeah,
my life. But very quickly when you get in it, that's
that is
stifled.
revealed
So
to
that
be
is a
true. Yeah.
toxic religious
Mhm.
environment. Um, Most religions have this community, this relatedness. You might even feel that you're related, you have a relationship with something higher,
Mhm.
God or some other way of describing something more profound. So that can have a powerful effect on our psychological need. And that's maybe something we should pick up with in a minute.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Feelings of competence, that can both be beneficial but also be a bit toxic, I suppose. But belief that you're doing the right thing, that you can please God, or that you can help the community, or that you are part of something and people value you and respect you.
Mhm.
When you go to the hall or the church or the mosque or wherever you are, people recognize you and they value you. that makes you feel worth something. It makes you feel valued. So I can see how religions that are not toxic can do that for you.
Yeah.
But there are religions and beliefs and cults that are toxic that don't do that for you. So I think that's really important to be able to differentiate between those two.
No, I think that is true, because we don't want people to run away with the idea that, okay, well, to live long and happy, I need to join a religion no matter what, because that's not
That's right. It's got to
that's
be a.
yeah,
It's not the religion, really. It's not the beliefs.
no,
It now the question about being related to something higher. I think that's a very interesting question, and
yeah. Does
is
that make
something
you
that.
feel good?
Yeah, that's right. So is a lack of a belief in the divine or in the supernatural,
Mhm.
does that damage our levels of happiness? Are we missing
Mm,
out? I suppose, are you and me missing out in that
yeah.
we haven't got this connection
Hmm.
to the divine? So some people would say
Right.
yes.
Yeah.
What about you? What do you think?
I don't think so. I don't know, because again, it's in contrast to the the A of the ABC. So for me,
Mm,
the thing that I can understand why it might bring someone calm is that you can say it's out of my hands, and you can just be like, as someone that worries, I'm a worrier, I'm an anxious person by nature, working on it. Um, you know, I can understand the allure of being able to be like, it's out of my hands. I can't deal with it.
mm,
God will deal with it in whatever way he sees fit. And I can
mm.
understand how that would be, you would want that. But also, I just don't believe it. So it doesn't bring me any
Yeah.
of that comfort that it will be okay and it will all be all right, because I just don't think that. And I
Mm,
think I have agency to do what I can to make it be all right and be okay.
mm.
And that's as far as I think it goes. And then being able to let it go and be like, I've done everything I can do, and that's it now,
Yeah.
is as much contentedness as I can expect.
Yeah, I think the way because I've thought about this a lot over the years,
Yeah.
um, since leaving Jehovah's
Yeah,
Witnesses,
yeah. Did you
which,
let go your
as everyone
chance
knows,
at contentedness?
yeah, I mean, I was never content. I too was anxious. So there
Yeah.
you go. That's my gift to you, Celine. Um, but I so it wasn't. I didn't feel that I've lost that. I don't feel that
Mhm.
I've lost some contentedness because I had a relationship with God.
Yeah.
I never felt that, but some do. I think
Mhm.
certainly some religious people um, claim that, and I don't
Mm.
disbelieve them. I think what the spiritual. So I think we're getting into spirituality here. I think the
Yeah.
spiritual side of me, um, when I look up at the stars at night. Sometimes I will go out into the cold and just look up at the
Mhm.
stars, and I'm just absolutely in awe at that. I look at that and I just think, I don't understand the meaning and purpose of life,
Mhm.
or indeed everything, and that is quite, in a way, that in itself is a very spiritual feeling,
Mm.
um, and I just think that we don't have all the answers. We don't. We can explain the physical um, phenomena that is the universe to some degree, and
Mhm.
there's still a lot to learn. But as a human race, we're incredibly tenacious at trying to find those things out, and we are finding those things out. But there'll always be mysteries, and
Mm.
how big is the universe? Is it infinite? Where did it come from, and why is there something rather than nothing? All of these reasons for God that some people bring out, it's a reason to say that there's mystery,
Yeah.
and that's amazing. And the fact that we don't know that means that there could be loads and loads of answers to that, some of which we'll never be able to understand.
Mhm.
But I think that's in itself interesting, and I do take a kind of comfort from the fact that, there's all this universe out there, and there may be life on other planets. I think it's very likely. But even if there are, whether there are or not, we are still amazing in that
Mm.
we are this sort of physical manifestation of chemistry and physics that in some way has become conscious and thinks about these things. And I think
Mm.
that is amazing. I
Yeah.
think that is amazing. It's a way that a physical thing like the universe can start to explore itself,
Hmm.
because we are part of the universe, and we are explaining, we are understanding itself. And I think that is amazing. So that fulfills a bit of my spiritual need, and
Mm.
trying to understand that as much as I can. I'm not a physicist, but just listening to the research and trying to understand it, I just find that absolutely inspiring and fascinating. So I think there's a bit of that as well that is needed in life. So I don't consider myself a spiritual person, but I think there is a need to think about those bigger questions, and
Yeah.
that's part of maybe what we miss as
Mm.
well
Hmm.
if we have a purely material sort of
Hmm.
view of the world.
Mm. That's interesting. I mean, I think another reason I realised why I wanted to talk about this was because I just read a book called Transcendent Kingdom, and she's a scientist. She's a
Mm,
neuroscientist, but also comes from a background of being in like a very religious group that she leaves, and she's
right.
like, the sort of like um, deep south talking in tongues
Oh,
kind of thing. And it was very interesting because yeah, it's she clearly doesn't believe in God, but she there is this I suppose missing of even though it was a wrathful God, but missing of a simpler time kind of thing where questions had answers and and all
mm,
that sort of thing. So I can understand as well the peace that would bring, and then yeah, the lack of peace when you realise not all questions have answers. But I guess for you as well,
yeah.
though, it's different for different people, isn't it? You're finding peace in looking at the sky and being like, we don't know everything, and that's peaceful for you. So it's how
Yeah,
engaging with that part of yourself, isn't it?
yeah, that's it. Exactly. Exactly. I think, that is the thing. It's allowing yourself to, I guess, again, we're back to individual differences, but not everybody possibly needs that.
Hmm.
But I think some of us do. And just grappling with some of those mysteries is just,
Mm.
it is for me, it's as close to religion as I get
Yeah,
in terms of that spiritual
yeah.
experience. I don't religiously cling to a particular dogma or doctrine,
Mm.
but I do think that is the closest I get to a spiritual experience, is when I look up
Yeah.
at the sky and see
See,
those thousands of
mm.
points of light. It's amazing.
See, one thing that's interesting with this conversation is I realize I feel like I'm more atheist than you, but not in a like not in like a like in the sense that I just don't feel any spiritual
Mm,
connection at all. I just feel like
mm.
sp- I don't have a little if everything's got charge bars, I feel like I just don't have any. There's nothing attributed to it. I'm just there like
Mm,
just I look at the sky and I'll think that, oh, it's beautiful and lovely. And then I'll just not, think in just don't
yeah.
get that, or I don't, or some people will see like a feather or a robin or whatever, and they're
Mm.
like, oh, that's probably like grandma. That would never
That's a different
come
thing,
to
though,
me.
isn't it? That
No, I
yeah,
know,
but I
but all
think
these different ways that people engage with spirituality
yeah,
in a very
mm,
personal way to them. I'm like, I don't think I ever do. I never feel that, but maybe that's what it comes. I never had a well of spirituality to run dry to then want to refill. If you know what I mean. I didn't grow up with that. I don't know.
but I would suggest that your mum's quite like that as well. So I
Yeah.
don't, uh, obviously I'd leave her to speak for
Yeah.
herself, but she doesn't sort of have those same reactions as
Mm,
as I do. So yeah, I think it comes down to this individual
yeah.
differences
And it's
element of it.
what makes you
That's just
happy.
one
Yeah.
part.
What brings that
That's just one
contentedness?
part of Yeah, exactly. So if you don't have those feelings, then I don't think that's a problem.
No,
That's just
I'm not going to die
um,
young.
no, no,
I won't live to
no. That's right.
100 because I just didn't feel connected to the stars. God damn
Exactly. So
it.
we're coming to the hour really. So we're probably getting
Yeah,
to the end of our conversation. But I
still
just wanted,
winding down. Yeah.
before we do finish, I just want to, I suppose, the other thing that I did think about, and I want maybe we'll talk about this again another time. But truth matters to me.
Mm,
Truth claims matter. So
mm,
that is the reason I left Jehovah's Witnesses, is because I realised it wasn't true.
yeah.
A particular irony, because people call it the truth
Yes.
within the organisation.
It is
Um,
incredibly bullshit, but yes.
yeah, it is a big claim there, but I realised it wasn't true, and there were too many things about it that were completely not true.
Hmm.
Um, without getting into them now, and that was what actually started me on my road to leaving. It wasn't anything else. It wasn't. It wasn't a lack of brotherly love or falling out with the organisation or being offended by something. It wasn't the restrictions. It wasn't any of those things. I
It
can
just
look
wasn't
back now
true.
and say, those are problems, but that wasn't why I left. It was because it wasn't true. I knew that the things I was being told that
Mm,
were true were not.
yeah.
And as we've not mentioned this yet on the podcast, but we're in 2024 now,
Hmm.
which is 110 years since 1914, when Jesus was supposed to have taken kingdom power,
Hmm.
and this generation would by no means pass away until all these things occurred, which meant that before the end of, before people that saw 1914, before they died off, we would
Hmm.
see the end of this wicked system of things in the new world. And they're all dead now.
Yeah.
They'd be obviously 110 years since 1914. For them to even be conscious, sort of alive and conscious of that, there'd have to be at least 10. So you're talking about 120. Somebody would have to be 120 now to remember those times. It's done.
Hmm.
And for me, that is the nail, final nail in that coffin. But um, that was the reason that I left. And so it matters to me. So I cannot belong to an organization or a church or a belief system that claims some truth claims just for the benefits of community and um, whatever else I get out
Mm,
of that psychologically.
yeah.
I can't do it. I just can't do it. It has to. The claims they make have to be true. Um, it doesn't mean that any group can know everything, but when you make dogmatic claims, then if they're not true, then I'm not interested.
Hmm.
That's my that, and that I think is important. There's a lot of nonsense ideas, a lot of
Hmm.
things that are claimed, but so whilst I absolutely respect everybody's right to believe whatever they want to, and I would support people having the right to believe so long as they don't hurt others. Um, it doesn't mean that I also don't have a right to call it out and say it's not true.
Hmm.
Show me the evidence. Give me the reasons why this is true. If you can't do that, then I'm not going to accept it, and I'm going to criticize it in a respectful way. So that I think is really important. So, okay, religion, there might be elements of it that actually make people happy. Great. As you said, let's take those and apply them to um, settings where you're not making false claims about the
Yeah.
world,
Hmm.
because that matters to me.
Yeah. It's not going to make you happy, is it?
No, because I'll always be knowing that no, that isn't actually the case. That isn't actually true. So
Yeah.
maybe people are different, but that's for me that is the very first
The crooks.
hurdle that any religion or belief system has to get over is what they say about the world true? And if it's demonstrably not, then for me that's
Tapping
the
out
end. I
time.
need to move on. Exactly. Yeah. And there's a lot of stuff that you see on the internet, a lot of stuff that
Hmm.
ex-members put out there. Oh, what about this and what about that? My big question is, where's the evidence for it?
Mm,
If there's no evidence for it, I'm not interested in it.
yeah. It's fair. It's fair. I think yeah, I'm being careful with my. Well, I've reduced my Instagram scrollable time because I realised I wasn't gaining anything from it. I've been reading more, which is great.
Yeah,
Because yeah, there's a lot of claims flung from here to there on that platform because it's just a quick, however long video, being like, and this in this thing, if you eat this, you'll die tomorrow. And this, if you need to do this so that you can, be the perfect person. And if you do this, you'll have this way of, whatever. I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go read a modern classic. I'm gonna go read White Sargasso Sea and see if that improves me better.
yeah, no, I totally agree.
Cool.
Right, okay. I think we're done there. So
Yeah, I
thank you
think
for
so.
that.
Yeah,
Enjoyed
yeah,
that.
yeah. Well,
Interesting
it's just
stuff.
something. It just came up. It was a very small part of the doc, but it got my back up a little bit, and I wanted to discuss it. So,
Yeah, I think we've unpacked that pretty
yeah,
well. Good.
cool.
All right. Well, thank you for listening, everybody. So don't forget to subscribe if you're on
Mhm.
those platforms that you need
Yeah,
to, or
yeah.
follow
Mhm.
whatever the
Share with a
whatever the thing is.
friend.
Yeah, share with other people.
Community.
That's really
Don't
important.
you want us to have a community? Ooh.
All
So
right,
yeah.
cool. Thank you very much. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye for now.